Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Ask Me Anything session with the testing guru, Michael Bolton. My name is Jarmo Vanninen, and I am your host for this hour-long show. I represent Hidden Trail. We are a digital product quality consultancy, and we are hosting Michael's RST Explored course next March in Helsinki. And now, before we get started, since this is an Ask Me Anything session, we are hungry for some insightful questions about testing. So please write them down in the stream and get answers. Now, with that preliminary intro out of the way, I'm turning the spotlight on our guest for today. Michael, great to have you here.
Thank you.
So, to kick things off, there might be some people in attendance that actually don't know who you are. So can you give us a brief, quick debrief on your background?
Sure. I've been a tester since August 15th, 1961, which every person on the planet is born a tester, and then we send people to school and they learn how to stop being testers. Just don't ask questions, just sit in your place and do what you're told. I actually started doing testing for money when I became a programmer for money. And that involves a lot of testing your own work. And because I was not working with a professional tester, I maintained really close relationships with the people who were using the software, and got education in how the builder's mindset is different from the tester's mindset. That was at a headhunting company. For 8 years, I worked at a place called Quarterdeck, which at the time was producing mass market commercial software for memory management and multitasking. Have you ever heard about those things? That multitasking, it's this weird thing where you can run more than one program at once on the same computer. To kind of a dead end idea. So I don't know whatever happened to it. Quarterdeck, the company, was an early adopter of the idea of going out of business on the internet, which it did more or less in 1998. We were 3 years ahead of a whole bunch of people who went out of business in 2001. From there, I became independent. In 2001, I met James Bach. And 2 years later, I started teaching his class. And 2 years after that or so, I became a co-author of Rapid Software Testing, which I now teach all over the place, all over the world. And I do consulting in testing and test strategy. And I upbraid people on, on LinkedIn sometimes. Because what we really want, it seems to me, is for people to think more clearly and actively about testing and what it means, what it can do, its extents, its limitations, those kinds of things. So that's what I'm up to. Oh, and I play mandolin and banjo for fun when I'm not doing all this testing-oriented stuff.
Interesting. I think we'll save the mandolin and banjo questions for the next AMA, but let's
idea.
Testing today. Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned RST. So can you explain what is RST and like who is it targeted for?
Rapid software testing is a methodology or an approach. A methodology is like a system of methods, a bunch of different things in relationship with each other. The idea behind it is to do the fastest, least expensive testing that we can do in order to completely fulfill the mission of testing, which is understanding the status of the product and recognizing problems that threaten its value before it's too late. That doesn't just mean quick testing. We aspire to that, but it also means deep testing, where deep testing is warranted, where risk is high and the possibility of bugs is elevated. and where value can be threatened in various ways: loss of data, money, life, health, safety, opportunity, anything that could cause loss or harm or damage or bad feelings or diminished quality. So we try to keep people alert to that, and sometimes that involves vigorously diving into the product and going down deep and looking for rare and hidden and subtle and emergent, intermittent bugs in ways that developers don't have time to do, and are often not inclined to do, and are always at a kind of disadvantage to do because they've got the builder's perception of the product. And it's really, really hard to tear yourself away from that, to forget everything you know about the product and approach it from an outsider's perspective. And testers, interestingly, straddle that line between insider and outsider. It's our job to try to immerse ourselves in the world of the people who are building the product so that we can understand the internals and examine the product from that perspective, but also to immerse ourselves in the world of the people who are going to use the product or the people who are going to be affected by it. That's important as well. And that turns out to be a bit of a mental juggling act in a way, to try to make sure that we've got a reach on both sides, that we try to clear out the biases and the prejudices that we have from being immersed in the world of the builder, and trying to elevate our perspective in terms of the user's perspective and the other people affected by the product, like the customer support people and the documenters and the people affected by the product, even though they're not direct users of it.
That got me thinking. So, if RST is all this, so what prompted you to create this methodology in the first place? It got me thinking there might have been something wrong in how testing is approached or done in the marketplace.
Heaven forfend. What James and I both observed in Silicon Valley-like companies, and then looking around the rest of the testing world through conversations with colleagues who were in other contexts, what we noticed was that too much of testing, from our perspective, was focused on the trappings and not on the actual work. So bureaucracy and paperwork that people never read. The forms of what we now know is automated checking, which seem to have amount to an elaborate conspiracy to make sure that nobody actually set eyes or hands on the product. A bunch of models of testing that we felt and that we continue to feel aren't particularly helpful. And a lot of confusion about what testing is really for. And here's the primary one, it seems to me, that there's still a huge number of people who believe that the object of testing is to build confidence in the product. And I don't think that works very well for testers. For developers and designers and the people who are making the product, absolutely, that's their job, to build confidence in the product, and that's also the job of the marketers while we're at it. But actually, for the tester, it seems to us, such confidence as somebody might have about the product is a byproduct of what we do, which is the attempt to identify and to some degree destroy unwarranted confidence. There are testers who claim that they break the software. They don't. Testers broken when they get it. What we do is we try to break illusions about the software. So we try to examine the software and see if what people think or believe about it is warranted. And we do that by experiencing the product, getting involved with it immersing ourselves in it, learning about it, trying to use it as end users would, trying to examine it deeply as testers do, trying to think in terms of how it's constructed like developers do. And all those perspectives added up allow us to identify the actual status of the product, and the possible threats to value in it.
Yeah, so it seems that like the role of testing is to sort of shine a light on anything that is hidden out there within the software. Would you agree with this statement?
Spoken like a rapid software testing appreciator. That's exactly right. The job of testing is to light the way of the project in our way of looking at it.
All right, amazing. It seems that we have our first attendee questions coming in. So let's kick off with a a hot topic today. So Christina asks, hello, as a test guru, how do you see the evolving AI in the field of testing? How much threat it has or will have on test engineers?
How much threat?
Yeah.
None. Guaranteed lifetime employment for people who have to look critically at software. On my blog, I recently wrote a post to the developers that basically amounts to this. I hope you enjoy your new promotion, because now, dear developer, you are not going to be a writer of code. Now you are going to be an evaluator of code and an editor of somebody else's code. And you're going to be supervising a being, sort of, not really. You're going to be supervising a process that spits out code and that doesn't understand what it's doing. It fundamentally doesn't know what it's doing. What this means is that certainly for developers are going to have to become code reviewers for something that is designed to look like a barely competent programmer. That means that such bugs as there are in the code written by that barely competent programmer are going to tend to be subtle. They're going to tend to be hidden in this huge volume of code that's being generated by these things. So for testers, we're in really good shape, or at least our kind of testers are, I would say. The kind of testers who are used to taking from somebody else a list of attributes, formulas, tables, algorithms, and saying, for this set of inputs, we're going to produce that set of outputs. Well, large language models in particular don't work like that. They're designed to produce output that's variable. So what we have to decide with that is whether the illusion that the LLM provides of being a thinking or a reasoning human being is sufficiently persuasive. And of course, it's not. I urge people, go look up Stephen Wolfram's article on what is ChatGPT doing and why does it work. For those who want a deeper appreciation of what's actually going on, look at Ben Levinstein, who wrote a long series on, I think, 5 parts or so, a series of long blog posts breaking down exactly what's happening during large language model and transformer-based kinds of architectures. And have a look at those things and see that what they're producing is a stream of literally randomized stuff, stochastically produced, that is designed to look good rather than be right. And Rodney Brooks puts it that way in an article for IEEE, an interview that was done with him. That's worth looking up as well. So those 3 sources are really good. It's worth looking at the work of Gary Marcus as well. This does not pose an existential threat to testers who are fundamentally risk investigators, explorers of what's going on in a product. People who are thinking critically about software, no problem, seems to me. Where we might be under threat is from rather dopey, rather dim-witted managers who once again just love the idea of making people go away. That's what that's been a concern all the way along. Wouldn't testing be so much better and so much easier if we didn't have these people telling us about problems in the product? Wouldn't it be better if we could just release it? And if you look at the release of ChatGPT 3.5, what happened last year about this time, just about exactly a year ago, a recent New York Times article laying out the history of that. Like the guy who launched the Titan submersible, the whole strategy here was to get something out there before people started worrying their pretty little heads about problems in it. And what is happening right now, it seems to me, it's not quite cemented yet, but there's a lot more sobriety in the discussion about large language models and what they can and cannot do for us than there was, say, 6 months ago when the whole world was in a tizzy about it. The key is, if you want to find out how much of an existential threat this poses to testers, go try testing some of it, but test it critically. Don't just look for it to produce answers that look good. Go deep into what it's producing and examine that thoroughly. Look for risk, look for problems, and then remember that when you ask something or ask a large language model, this time, the question that you get will not necessarily be the answer that you get will not necessarily be the answer that you get next time. Then you can look at some of the work of Gary Marcus and in particular his colleague Ernest Davis. They recently wrote a paper on the performance of the Wolfram Alpha plugin and ChatGPT 4. What they found, the results were not exactly fantastic. We still need good old-fashioned humans to evaluate the state of these things if we're going to do it well.
There's another question asking to continue the AI aspects. I know that you are not the biggest fan of it. Maybe I had the wrong idea in parentheses. But do you still think that there is something to benefit from it in testing? So,
well, it's like I'm neither a fan nor not a fan. Okay, I mean, I don't. Technology is. I'm going to borrow once again. It said this lots of times. Borrowing from Marshall McLuhan. Technologies of all kinds are media. A medium is something that's in between this and that, right? Small, medium, large, or the medium, from the spirit world who is acting as an intermediary between you and your long lost relatives and stuff. Okay. A medium is something in between. All technologies are media, and media have these characteristics. They extend, enhance, intensify, accelerate, enable, amplify human capacities in some form. However, media are agnostic about whether they're good or bad. They intensify and accelerate whatever we are. If we are virtuous, media extend our virtue. If we are devious, if we're not nice people, it extends our not niceness. Large language models accelerate all kinds of stuff. What they mostly accelerate is the capacity to generate text. But let's look beyond that. Once we've got lots of text being generated, what do we have? Oh, well, maybe we have some text that produces funny parodies of bad posts on management. I got a wonderful one the other day that somebody sent me a link to a bad post on management, and I cut and pasted it, and I put it into ChatGPT, and I say, rewrite this as a parody of itself, and it did a really good job. Then I asked it to be a little nastier and to supply some more dirty words, and it did an even better job. of doing that. But here's the thing: the output didn't matter. What the key thing about a large language model is if its output doesn't matter too much, if it's being supervised by a human being and edited by a human being, then the danger of it is greatly reduced. But the human being has to look at it critically. If the output of any algorithm not created by a human is used in collaboration with a human, and the human is in charge, then it's fine. Now, of course, there are other issues associated with LLMs. The volume of information makes it difficult for us to evaluate its output at scale. But if we're going to apply that output in a non-harmful way, not a big deal. If we're going to depend on it or trust it for accuracy, as in the case of, say, creating test data, I just put something up last night on my blog about that. If you use ChatGPT or any other large language model to generate test data, you better look at that pretty carefully to find out whether it's what you wanted or not. If you don't, the risk of your intentions going this way and the possibility of the data that's being generated going that way approach asymptotically 100%, right? It's these things don't know what they're doing, and they have to be put under the supervision of people who do. But say, for example, an algorithm that peruses medical images and looks for patterns that humans don't necessarily see. If it helps the human to see them, that's good. If it's a corrective lens, great. If it's not a corrective lens, or if the old expression, if you let your eyes run away with you, when you go by the cake at the buffet, if you let your eyes run away with you, glasses that make the cake look even more delicious are not that great for you. So the idea of humans being in control, at that point, AI algorithms aren't so bad. We've got to remember, though, that they're not written by intention, and therefore there's no reasoning behind it. It's essentially based on statistical patterns, and statistical patterns can be really, really, really interesting and powerful when we look at them with a critical eye, and we examine the risks associated with them getting things wrong. Classically, AI algorithms have been used for classification and for prediction. First thing we got to worry about there, prediction doesn't work that great in a changing socio-technological world controlled by all kinds of social and environmental forces. Like, for example, try making a prediction on how well your sprint's going to go on March 9th, 2020, right? The 2 weeks after March 9th, 2020 were very different from the 2 weeks before March 9th, 2020. And the world turns, right? The world turned on the COVID crisis. Well, we got to be a little bit nervous, it seems to me, about prediction. The AI algorithms predicting the price of houses. That can be vulnerable to sudden shocks and sudden surprises that come from events in the world that might not have anything to do with local real estate prices, but boom, all of a sudden they do. So let's be careful about prediction. It's hard when it's about the future, as many people have been inaccurately quoted as saying. The other thing that AI can be really good for is classification, putting things into various slots. But we got to be really careful when we're doing that with people, because AI is trained on the past. And if we look at the past behavior of human beings, it has sometimes been less than exemplary, especially in terms of things like hiring or guiding people into schools or guiding people out of jails. So we've got to be super, super skeptical about algorithms that were designed with a statistical significance in mind rather than evaluation of human behavior and other factors that aren't put into the training data, that aren't in the training model.
That's a good detailed answer. Sort of pivoting back from AI and robots to thinking about testing instead. Marco is asking, I think that instead of waiting for tools like AI and robots to save testing, we should focus on improving testing skills. Why testing is
Who is this person, and why haven't I well, maybe we have chatted actually, but boy, that's a great. I'm sorry to interrupt the question. I'm just so excited to hear it. Keep going.
Yeah. So instead of waiting for tools to save testing, we should focus on improving testing skills. Why is testing misunderstood too often?
A lot of reasons for it. One is that when you refer to tools, people just love their magic wands, right? It's lots of people are kind of ambitious to make those troublesome people go away, as I said earlier. There are other factors that have been involved in that. One is the commodification of testing that has happened through bogus certifications. That's a long rant. Gave my first keynote talk on that 16 years ago, and the situation has changed very little, except more and more testers and companies have been liberated from their money to go into the pockets of ISTQB certifiers. But I think a big part of the problem, to be blunt and direct about it, is that testing is in a feedback loop where testing is not valued, and so we put unskilled people in testing positions. And the really good people get promoted to other kinds of positions, maybe project management, but that was kind of a path that I took for a while, came back, to development positions, to other kinds of management positions. So that means that the good people are out and new people are coming in. And one of the big mistakes that I think companies make is that they put their least experienced people in testing roles rather than their most. It is very important, it seems to me, for a tester to have a substantial degree of experience in some domain, and ideally in multiple domains. To have some level of domain expertise, to have some level of experience in customer service, for example, which is another part of my path that I didn't quite mention in my potted bio back there. For a tester to have experience in programming as a developer, and then for the tester to take that set of experiences and those sets of knowledge and feed those into testing. Because to a certain degree, and it's not entirely, I'm not saying that we should get rid of all young testers and make sure that everybody is old, but some experience really, really helps testing, some experience in programming and or other domains. And it certainly doesn't have to be programming. Two more factors to mention on that. One is that the Agile movement, to a great degree, wrecked the role of test manager. Companies saw through expediency of one kind or another, or a sense of false economy, the idea that we should not have somebody overseeing the landscape of the product from the perspective of critical thinking and risk analysis. So what happened a lot, still happens a lot these days, is that testers get put into these little pods, these little groups with a group of developers. Now that's a good thing, it seems to me, to have the testers and the developers working really close together right from the get-go, right from the moment that somebody has an idea in their project, in their of the product in their project. It's a good thing to have critical thinkers, good thing to have risk investigators, somebody to say, well, what are we building and who are we building it for? What could go wrong? How would we know? That's the testing question and the testability question there. Good thing to have those people embedded in a development team, but it's also a good thing to have somebody at a higher level of management observing these groups working together and helping to clear the way of obstacles for testers who need the way cleared sometimes, who need resources and so on and so forth, that they won't necessarily get attention on within their little development pods, little development groups. Finally, the last factor that I think is quite crucial and requires some introspection, but you don't get that until you've been in the business a few years, is that testers aren't all very good at talking about testing and talking about risk and talking about how things can actually threaten the value of the product and of the project and of the business. That's what we need to focus on, it seems to me. What really matters starts with a question about who matters with respect to this product or this project, and then it gets to what problems could affect them. And there's all kinds of things in the culture that just don't help with that at all. Test cases, counting test cases, the ratio of passing and failing test cases, not helpful at all. Much more helpful, it seems to me, is a continuing, ongoing list of the 10, or pick your number, biggest problems in the product right now, the things that pose the greatest threat to the value of the product and the value of the business. A risk list where we identify problems in the product and problems in the project that could make their way to the top 10 problems. We've got to start, I believe, as testers, getting over our nervousness and our squeamishness about talking about problems and talking about errors. And that means we've got to develop certain kinds of analytical and social skills. How to tie that stuff up into a package that is palatable and that shines light on risk, so that the people who are putting the product together can decide whether the product they've got is the product they really want, or whether they should address the problems before release. And that means identifying, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of different roles whose ox might be gored by the product in some sense: customer service, support, sales, marketing, end users, the people who are clients or customers of those end users. We have to help management connect those dots to see how problems in the product might cause a risk to the business.
This is good stuff. Before we move on to the next question, I gently reminding people who might have joined the stream midway, please submit more questions to the chat and we will take those up and you will get answers. Moving on to Samuli. He has a question. What are the rising things in hype curve of software testing? Things that we see first talks in next couple of years.
Oh, geez, I don't know. I mean, certainly there's an enormous amount of hype about AI. The nice thing about all the hype in AI is that it's dampened to some degree all the hype about other kinds of tooling, which is, it's change is as good as a rest sometimes, right? But I have a policy where I try not to predict the future. once again, COVID, the emergence of all that hype about ChatGPT, various forms of conflict in the world, occasional insights. Who knows? Next year or next week, we could finally hear from the friendly aliens who visit Earth and finally announce their presence and say, "Here we are, and we're here to help you." And the first way we're going to help is we're going to get rid of a whole bunch of the old dudes who are running the world these days. We'll say thank you very much. We don't know any of that. We don't know what's going to happen. So I try not to make predictions about the future, but what I try to suggest that people do is to some degree future-proof themselves by looking at things that have sustained reasonably well in certain kinds of ways for the last 5, 10, 15, 25,000 years of human history. And that includes, although there's some risk to it, I'm thinking back to Socrates, right? The idea of questioning things and helping people to recognize what they know or what they could know if they looked a little bit harder. Of course, I suddenly recall that Socrates was forced to drink hemlock because people saw him as a threat to public order because he was helping people to think more clearly. It doesn't come without its risks, but the capacity to analyze complex things, the capacity to find trouble, the capacity to report on trouble. These are things that for a certain percentage of the population are going to remain timeless, because we, at the same time as we're doing that, there's a bunch of enthusiasts and supporters and cheerleaders, and to be honest with you, bullshitters, who don't worry about how wonderful things are going to be. And one of the key elements for a tester is to preserve your sense of doubt, to preserve your sense of skepticism. That's what testers do. While the technologists, the AI fanboys, all these other people are enthusiastically beating the drum and doing somersaults and waving the pom-poms and cheering things on, it's part of our job to remember that things could go wrong, to be a little bit less cynical about it. It is the job of developers and technologists to link the worlds of humans and the world of machines so that we can get all the good stuff, all the benefits. That's a really interesting and challenging job, because the machines are somewhat recalcitrant. They don't do exactly what you want to do. They kind of have to be told or guided or steered in order to do that. And programmers, developers, designers, they have this magical superpower of being able to link the world of humans and the world of machines. They're like the person who knows how to talk to the genie. Well, even people who know how to talk to genies, sometimes they're a little bit literal, a little bit specific. So sometimes it's good to have somebody who's going to question the contract that gets made between the developer and the genie and the magic lamp. That is a role for somebody who asks what could go wrong. I would say that that's always going to have value. It's always a tough sell, selling fire alarms is not that easy for people who believe they built fireproof buildings. But that's kind of what we're like. We're the dog that barks when the intruder comes by, and we're the fire alarm that goes off. And fire alarms sometimes go off when they don't need to go off. But that's because we would prefer to alert people to the possibility of trouble, even when there's not trouble there, because every now and again there is going to be trouble there, and we want to help keep people apprised of it.
Very philosophical. I did not expect this discussion to go back to ancient Greece. So let's move it into a more of a contemporary environment.
Ancient Greece is contemporary. The humans have been around for 2 million years. Ancient Greece is just the rounding error.
True that. Yeah. Eugene is asking, on the rapid software testing logo, I see it says it is a context-driven methodology. What does that mean?
What it means is to be context driven means that we aspire to, and we're not always great at it because we are to some degree context imperial, right? We got hired to be testers, and our arrival on the scene is going to change the context to some degree. But what context driven means is that we've got to recognize and deal with the context first. That's what we aspire to do. The reason for that is if we go into a gaming company, and then somebody's got an idea for a fun computer game, the kinds of approaches that we might use for testing medical devices aren't going to fly. Right? Bad idea. I'm going to slow things down, and certain things in games don't matter much. Whether the troll actually gets to pick up the shining gem and transport it into your backpack, nobody's going to die because of that. Correspondingly, if we use the kind of testing that we would use for an online dating service at a bank, there's going to be trouble there too, right? The risk profiles are different. The corporate culture is different. The development culture is no doubt different. The scale of things is no doubt different. The forms of trouble are different. So what context-driven means is to examine the factors in the context and to mind those all the way along. I forget who it was. Somebody had a talk called Mind the Context, which is, mind the gap between what our own ideas about how to test might be and the actual ideas that are appropriate and necessary for the particular situation that we're entering into. Context is a set of factors that might make a difference in the project environment. And that includes the mission of testing, who the clients of our testing are, who the customers of the product are, who the other stakeholders are. It includes the information that's available to us, who has it, what form it's in, where we can get it, where we can generate it, where we need to look it up, where we need to question it. Two categories of people who are so special that we call them out separately. The developers and our relationships with them, and the other testers, if there are any, on the team and our relationships with them. The skills that we have, the skills that we need, the expertise in various kinds of domains that we might need, how well situated we are as testers to perform testing appropriate to this project and to this context. We consider the equipment and tools available to us. We consider the schedule, the pulse rate, the heartbeat of the product. We consider the thing to be tested, the actual product that we're going to engage with. And then we consider the deliverables, what artifacts, what information, what work products do people anticipate from our testing. And those are some of the factors that go into our evaluation of context, so that we can tune the testing that we do to the project and the product with which we are working. That's what a context-driven means. Our context drives our choices, and both our context and our choices evolve over time. That's what that means.
To continue in that vein, Robert has a question. It's often said testers should sit with the developers. I think we should be closer to the product owner or business users. Do you have an opinion on who testers should be close to?
Everybody. It's we are we're my dear friend Rob Sabrin refers to us as like truffle hunting pigs. We're sniffing at the roots of all kinds of different trees, trying to find truffles. And for us, truffles sounds like troubles, doesn't it? So we're not truffle hunters, but trouble hunters. And in order to do that, we got to immerse ourselves throughout the project community, but not just that, also through the testing community, or sorry, to the user community. One of the things I think that customers, or that companies, rather, organizations do not very well, and I wish they did a whole bunch better, is that they often don't encourage, and in fact sometimes actively discourage, testers from immersing themselves in the world of the user, the world of the customer, the world of our testing clients. Harry Collins's book, so now I've mentioned all my favorites except for Jerry Weinberg and Kem Kainer, right? But now that I get to Harry, I'm thinking of his book called, Forms of Life. It's right here. This one. The method and meaning of sociology, what sociology is all about. And Kem Kainer first dropped this idea on me. I mean, he was throwing it all over the place, but it landed on me in about 2003, that testing is a social science. And one of the things that has really undermined good testing for a long time is the idea that it's a straightforward, normal, technical process of comparing specified outputs to actual outputs. But what Harry says in his book is I think, hugely relevant to testing, and it's what the sociologist does. The sociologist estranges himself or herself from the world that they're in, which is for sociologists typically universities or research entities of one kind or another, and estranges themselves from that world. Sociologists put themselves into the world of some other culture, some other society, some other social group. And they learn about that, and they study it, and they take notes on it. And then they estrange themselves from that social group, and they bring themselves back to their original social group and report on what they found. I can't tell you how important I believe that is for testers to do. I mean, it's just, I think it's absolutely vital for testers to immerse themselves in the world of the user to some degree. And one of the more inspiring stories I heard about that, back in 2008 at the Eurostar conference, this guy came up to me. His name is Oliver Vilson. He works as a tester in Estonia, has been doing that for a long time. And he talked about how his company, his organization, he worked for a company that did software for emergency response systems. They sent him out of the office to go visit people who are actually online with the headsets and the microphones and so on, talking to people who were calling the emergency response phone lines, and connecting those people with first responders, the fire people and the ambulance people and the police and so on and so forth. And they told Oliver, okay, you're there to watch, don't talk. Don't, they gave him a headset without a microphone. And they said, don't talk to the people while they're working. We'll give you time to debrief on breaks. You can go to lunch with them, absolutely. There'll be debriefing sessions. Don't talk to them while they're online, but do talk to them, watch, listen, and learn to what is going on in their job. And Oliver reported to me that that was transformational. It absolutely changed in every way his approach to testing this software. And they produced, of course, as you might anticipate, fantastic results. That's another reason why, one of the second best things to do is for people who work on the project, not just testers, by the way, but for people who work on the project to immerse themselves in the customer service department. Which would be great, except so many companies have gutted customer service departments and replaced them with chatbots, which I think is idiotic, basically. Nobody loves a chatbot. What they do love, kind of sometimes, is not having to wait. Well, there's another way of addressing that problem, and that is to use your customer service department as the nervous system of the company, the thing that's getting sense data from the outside, and to gather that and to pass that through into the development of the software. And testers at Quarterdeck, the vast majority of our testers came from the customers almost said customer disservice department. That's what they've turned into lately. But as we're dealing, software as a disservice is another one of the things I'm noticing these days. But anyway, the customer service department is hugely important in that, and it's a great farm system for testers. Unfortunately, those things have been gutted too. Another case of false economy by these companies.
To follow up on this question, there's a question by Balas asking, does the developer and tester role need to be separated? Wouldn't it be easier to teach both skill sets equally?
Sure, it'd be easier if we could do it. But here's the problem. A developer is always going to be a developer. A developer is always going to think like a developer to some degree. If you are building a product, and you know this from having written prose, from having written text, from having written code of your own, that what the developer never has is critical distance from the work at the time, close to the time that he or she is doing the work. Now, you know this from writing your own code. If you've written your own code, you know this absolutely. All you have to do is go back to your own code 6 weeks from now and look at it, and your first reaction is going to be, wait a second, who wrote this shit? Oh my God, I did. Right? Everybody has this experience. If you go back and look at writing that you've done, even if it's not code, you look at it and you say, oh my God, how did I miss that? Oh, this argument isn't being developed very thoroughly. Oh, I left that out. And of course, how do you get access to that really quickly? You give it to somebody who has greater critical distance than you do. Now, a good way to do this, one good way to do this, is as a developer to take your code to another developer and to say, I want you to find problems in this. Anybody who says the developers aren't good testers, try this out, because what you'll find out is that the second developer in this case is a demon. They're all over problems in the other developer's code, especially if there's a little bit of competition, a little bit of gamification. Go ahead, sucker, find problems in this thing. Boom, 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 boom. There's a bunch of them. That can work really well. But developers are always going to have the perspective of developers, just almost entirely across the board, unless they're making stuff for other developers. Therefore, if we're making stuff for people who are not developers, it's super important to have a non-developer perspective involved in the testing of it. And I would argue to have somebody who is, once again, immersed in the domain of the people who are going to be using the software to evaluate it from that perspective. But another thing that is really super important, it seems to me, is if we're writing code, writing a product that is designed for other developers to use, that is an application programming interface, then it's really important for the people who are testing that not just to be saying, oh, here's a list of inputs that we're going to feed into something to produce a set of specified and presumably desirable outputs, right? Contract testing, as it's sometimes called. Contract checking, we would call it, but that's another discussion. That's okay. That's a good thing to do. But what it does not do is it does not give us a perspective on what it is like for some other developer outside the builders of this API to use that API to get stuff done. Therefore, even testing of an API can be done experientially. Experiential testing being the kind of testing wherein the tester's encounter with the product is practically indistinguishable from that of some contemplated user. If you're going to test an API really, really well, it seems to me that part of that testing must be done from the perspective of somebody who is going to be the user of that API. That is another developer. And one of the better ways to do that, it seems to me, is to try to build something with that API. That's the point at which you're going to surface problems with, among other things, the documentation, the intuitiveness of the interface, the degree to which the error messages and the responses that you get back from the endpoint are sensible and useful and non-confusing, where you essentially get a sense of the usability of that API. And you don't get that just from feeding input and checking output. So I hope that addresses the issue there. Moving on to the second cup of coffee. Third of the morning.
Actually, we are quickly running out of time, but we have room for one more question. And this one is from Pierre.
Not Pierre Garrigue, is it?
No.
All right. No. Some other Pierre.
Yeah, the other Pierre asks, one thing that I find being one of the hardest things in my profession as a tester is to define or identify when good enough testing is reached. Several discussions with managers often ends up in me trying to justify more both shallow and deep testing, while my counterpart is often of a different opinion. So how can I effectively approach that kind of Mexican standoff where I'm aiming to do more testing and the other one thinks we are done?
Well, first of all, this is one of the sort of sad realities sometimes for some testers is that we don't get to decide what's good enough. In the same way that if you go to a restaurant and you say, that was really delicious. Can I have the bill, please? And the waiter says, no, you haven't had enough of our wonderful food. That rarely happens. And we're providing a service. And once the client has decided that we've discharged our service, that we've done something that is satisfying to them, then we are indeed done. Now, why do they think we're done when we don't think we're done? And I think the answer is that we still have an apprehension of risk where they don't. So one way to shine light on that, it seems to me, and I'll see if I can bring it up super quick because I can. One way we can do that is to talk about how thoroughly we have covered the product and it's actually something I want to get out into the community because I'm about to write a chapter in a book on coverage. Coverage is really about thoroughness, isn't it? It's about how thoroughly we've examined the product with respect to our models of the product. So, let me put that on here. I hate it when people show that bit of this stuff that isn't. I want to do Shift F5. There we go. That's a little better. I'm not sure how readable that is. It's going to depend on your screen. But when we talk about how thoroughly we've tested, it seems to me that we can talk about it in terms of levels. These numbers as such are not to be taken as anything other than a kind of a ranking relative to one another and relative to a certain description. How's that looking, Jarmo? Is the screen readable there?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, good. Level 0. We don't know anything about this really. I mean, we might know it that this area of the product is there, or this perspective on the product is available to us, but really it's fundamentally nothing we know very much about. If we've done any testing on it at all, it's been shallow and we don't really trust it. Level 1 coverage is, okay, we've looked at this, but we're really just getting to know it at this point. We're beginning to learn how to think about testing it, and we've done some preliminary sort of tire kicking of it, but we haven't even got into the car yet and taken it for a drive around. Level 2 coverage is, okay, we've taken it out for a test drive. We're developing our models on how to think about the product and how to test it, how to think about risk, how people might use the product, how people might get benefits from it. We're compiling our risk list. We're refining our models of the product and how we might test it. Level 3 coverage says, okay, we have done sufficient testing on this product from this perspective, and coverage is very highly multidimensional, but we understand this product well enough that we can assert that if there were a problem that we didn't know about, it would be a really, really big surprise to us. And it would be evidence that not that we did bad work, but that there's something really interesting and deep here to learn about the product and about how to test the product. So notice that that's different from quality. We can get level 3 coverage on a product that's in terrible shape. Coverage is how thoroughly we've examined the product, how well we know it, such that anything that we might say about the product or its quality is warranted, defensible. And we've got not only do we have evidence, but we have evidence for how we collected our evidence, how we got our evidence. When we show that to our clients and say, well, we've only got level 1 coverage on this area of the product. If we're looking at this part of the product, we've covered performance and security reasonably well, but there are these forms of data that might get thrown at it where we see a risk. There's a possibility of reliability here because of the interactions between parts of the system that we haven't examined that great. And then asking the client at that point, are you okay with that? That's the fundamental question of testing. Well, one of the two. First fundamental question of testing, it seems to me, is, are there problems that threaten the value of the product or that threaten the on-time successful completion of whatever our work happens to be right now? Whatever we're looking at, are there problems that threaten its successful on-time completion? Are there problems that threaten the value of the product? That's one big question of testing. But the other big question of testing is the question that I'm asking when I'm looking back over my shoulder and my client literally standing there in my imagination saying, are you okay with this? Are you okay with how much testing I've done relative to the potential risks that I have anticipated that I think you might care about? If the client goes over my risk list and my list of my diagrams and my mind maps or my tables of how I've covered the product, this is what I've done. These are the things that I still think are kind of open questions. These are places where I believe risk could still be hiding. Are you okay with that? And the client says, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. Don't care about that. Don't care about that. Oh, that is potentially problematic. Maybe we should do some more testing on that. If I've been heard on those dimensions, I'm fine. The client doesn't have to do what I think the client should do. That's not an obligation. The customer doesn't have to eat what their waiter wants them to eat. But the tester has a kind of duty to, just like the waiter, say, but have you tried one of our delicious desserts before, or would you like a little digestivo after dinner? Those are things that a good waiter will do. Asking, are there still some risks you'd like me to investigate? Because we have this lovely list of risks for you to look at. That once the client has heard that, understood it, and decided, nope, we're going to accept the risks of not covering this. We're going to accept the risks of the product going out in this shape. And thank you, dear tester, for telling me about it. Once the client says that, I'm done. And now, if the client disagrees, there's something going on. One is that I haven't informed them sufficiently about the risks that I'm aware of. Maybe that's happened. So I got to do a check-in on that. Or maybe they've got something in their minds or in their business that maybe they don't want to tell me about. But as long as they say to me, I understand what you're warning about, I hear you, then as a service provider, I have to be satisfied that my client is satisfied with my degree of service.
That's a great way to bookend this discussion. Really good stuff. But unfortunately, we are officially out of time and have to end the intense questioning here. I hope you are okay with that.
I am. If anybody wants questions answered, michael@developsense.com. Always open. The door is always open to that. You can see me on LinkedIn. You used to be able to see me on the company formerly known as Twitter. I'm on Mastodon. I check in with that occasionally. I'm on WhatsApp. There's any number of ways of reaching me, and I invite you to do that because that's how James and I get to find out about what's important to people. So please avail of that opportunity by all means.
Yes, absolutely. We will see each other in the flesh in next March for the RST Explored course from March 4th to 6th, to be exact.
I'm looking forward to that so much. Oh, it was such fun last time. We had such a great crowd. Yes, 24 eager testers. Some of them had taken the class before. One, it was his fourth time through the class. And he said that he learned new stuff. Our exercises have changed a lot over the years. So we welcome visitors, but we also please send your developers, please send your managers, because the class is for those people too. It's for anybody who's involved with testing in any way, not just for testers, not for testers only.
That's an amazing plug. And for those interested in participating in this 3-day course, we put out a link in the description for the ticket web shop. So yes, once again, thank you, Michael, for the answers and all of the attendees for your precious time. And we are wrapping up this broadcast. So have a pleasant day, everyone, and a great upcoming holiday season.
Thank you. Thanks to Hidden Trail. Thank you, Jarmo. All the best to everyone.
All right. Thank you. Over and out.